Tuesday night edition of the Anaheim Calling podcast. We're back after a bit of a hiatus. And so for those of you who may be wondering, hey, what's going on? What are you guys doing? Get out of bed. There's a reason for that. So we've maybe touched on this in previous podcasts, but now to just somewhat make it official, the platform that we're on here at SB Nation Vox Media has changed its rules basically for independent contractors. This is in reaction to a new law in California, and it limits each quote-unquote independent contractor to 35 submissions a year. And so for the purposes of this podcast, one podcast counts as a submission. And so going to run the analytics here means that for the rest of the season, we can't really do a podcast after each and every game like we have been in the past, which is a bummer because I know that a lot of people, part of the draw of our podcast is that it's the instant reaction. It's consistent Ducks content. And you know, it's frustrating for us as well, just because, hey, this is kind of our bread and butter. This is what we really got to be known for amongst our listeners. And so it's frustrating, but it's temporary. We're still going to be doing podcasts on a regular basis each and every week. I don't think that our show is going to have this huge setback. We're probably going to be hovering around 2 shows a week, which to be honest is fine.
We'll probably, instead of going, and everything's fluid, nothing's set in stone at this point. We're still kind of figuring it out as you can.
Well, this is
tell.
for right now. This is what's happening right now.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think as of right now, the plan is we'll do almost about every other game, something around those lines.
Yeah, which should average out to about 2 shows a week.
Yep.
And so that being said, though, as far as what the future holds, we just don't really know yet. We're looking around, hoping to find a network, someone that will allow us to kind of do what we do. But for right now, this is what we got. So you're still going to get the show that you know and love, just not quite at the same insane clip that we were doing before. Jake, anything else you want to add on that? Or
no,
just on here?
I think you pretty much covered it for the most part. I think, it's a bit of a bummer because it is our bread and butter, but we're still going to strive to give you the same good content that we've been providing for the last, what would it be? This is now our 3rd season of doing this. So just instead of it being every game, it's now going to be every other. We'll still try to recap both games now. And so it will just be 2 games in 1 pod now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there are some games where the game is less interesting. And so being able to package in 2 games into one, kind of giving it a little time to marinate, isn't the worst thing in the world either. I think that the shows may get a little more content dense as opposed to before, where we're trying to work pretty hard to get a lot out of a single game. So all of this being said, we've got 2 games to talk about, like you just said, Jake. We've got a shootout loss by the Ducks on Sunday night. Sorry, shootout win.
God, you were right the first time.
I don't know why I doubled back on
also,
that. It's because they lost tonight to Columbus. So the Ducks beat the Nashville Predators in a shootout on Sunday night, got Peter Laviolette fired in the process.
Lots of Ducks fans are happy about that.
Oh, I'm sure. And then the Ducks lost tonight to the Columbus Blue Jackets at Honda Center. And so 2 very different games. I think that if you look at the game on Sunday, where the Ducks were playing kind of this more up-tempo game, and you look at their 4-3 loss tonight, I think we didn't. It's not like a tale of 2 teams type situation, but I did think that these 2 games were pretty starkly different. What's kind of your thought on that?
I'm going to actually kind of disagree with you there. I think, especially for the first period, and I think that's the key here, is the first periods between the 2 games were 2 of the best first periods that we've seen from the Ducks, I think, this year. I mean, at 5-on-5 in the first period against Nashville, they put up 32 shot attempts for, only 10 against, 19 of those on goal. Those are at 5-on-5. So tonight, not as good as I was thinking. They still had 13 shots on goal at 5-on-5, as compared to 19 against Nashville. But in terms of shot attempts, it was only 19 shot attempts. So they were a bit off the pace of what they started with against Nashville. But I still think that they've had 2 good first periods in a row. I actually think that there are a lot of similarities between these 2 games, with the Ducks taking their foot off the gas a little bit in both of them as the game went on. Started off really strong and then kind of tailed off near the end of it. So I think there's more similarities between these two games than stark differences, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you could argue that in both games they started well and, like you said, kind of trailed off a little bit. And in one game they found a way to win it, and in the other it just wasn't nearly enough. So a little bit of housekeeping here, some news. So over the weekend, quite a few call-ups for the Ducks. We would see some player movement. Chris Weidman, who was called up last week, was then sent back down. And then you would see Kiefer Sherwood and Daniel Sprong called up. So for some Ducks fans, that was just jumping for joy. But it was a bit reactionary to a potential injury for Andre Kasha, dealing with a bone bruise going into Sunday's game. He would end up playing in that contest, and so Kiefer Sherwood scratched in that game and then sent back down to San Diego the next day. Daniel Sprong, however, in the lineup, and I'm just going to spoil it, although if it happened 2 days ago, I'm sure you heard by now, got a goal and an assist in his second game of the season for Anaheim. And we're going to have plenty of opportunities to talk about this, but also looked pretty good doing it overall.
Yeah, I think he looked really, really good. And it's funny because it was one of those moments where it's kind of exactly what you and I have been harping on. You and I had been talking about for the last couple of weeks almost, the fact that Sam Carrick's up on the first line, and it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. His profile didn't exactly fit what you would want there necessarily, and you have Daniel Sprong just sitting there waiting, and he more fits the profile of a guy that you would want in that position. And what do you know? You put him in a game, and that line goes off. That line has a fantastic game. Daniel Sprong has a great game, obviously, with having a goal and an assist. And he showed why he was so highly regarded and why the Ducks traded for him in the first place. And we've mentioned this a few times on the show, but I think his age kind of gets lost in the shuffle a bit with some people because of the fact that trade, the fact that he kind of had this reputation, the fact that he's more well known, the fact that he requires waivers. It's almost as if people forget that he's only 21 years old, right? 22. Sorry,
he's the same age as Troy Terry.
Exactly.
They're born the same year, but about 7 months apart.
Exactly. So he's 22 years old. So it's not as if he's even in the same age or the same class as Kasha or a Nick Ritchie, which I feel like a lot of people in their head put Sprong in the same age group as those guys. He's more in the same age group as the Jones, the Terry, the Steele.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing with Daniel Sprong is that he has a lot more pro games under his belt, or he has quite a few pro games under his belt. Obviously, he has the streak going now with Anaheim, but going back to 15-16, got some games in Wilkes-Barre, 16-17, got some games, and then throughout his career, he had that really good season in 17-18 with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, got 65 points in 65 games. And so I feel like he's just been on the radar for a long time.
Yeah, and it's funny, Ginger Wolf in our Twitch chat even chimes in, says that kind of we're right on par there, or right on it with how the perception of him is different, because I guess Dan Wood and Steve Carroll for the radio broadcast tonight left him off their list of young talent that is playing.
Yeah, and that's just factually inaccurate.
Yeah.
I mean, he is quite literally one of the young guys.
Yeah.
And I get it. He's not homegrown, and so he's just not seen in that same light. But it's just not accurate, and that's okay. I mean, I don't think people are trying to put him down, but that it's just funny how those perceptions sometimes really just don't line up.
And the other thing is, I'm wondering if you polled some people who they would think would be older, Kiefer Sherwood or Daniel Sprong.
Yeah, I believe I think they're also the same age, or Sherwood is a little older.
Sherwood's a little bit older, and that's my point, is that I feel like some people might think that Daniel Sprong would be older than Kiefer Sherwood just from perception, different things like that, when in reality, because I think people would call Kiefer Sherwood a kid, whereas they might not necessarily say the same thing about Sprong.
Yeah, Kiefer Sherwood isn't. I mean, he's still a kid in the grand scheme of life. He's
true.
But in terms of hockey, he's 24.
Yeah.
Right. So, and this season, so in March 31st, he'll turn 25.
Yeah.
So Kiefer Sherwood is the furthest thing from a kid in terms of NHL hockey. So yeah, I mean, it's just interesting, those differences in perception. But moving into the game, though, like you said, the Ducks had one of maybe their best first period of the season. Looking at the numbers, the shot attempts at 5-on-5, 32-10 in favor of the Ducks. And maybe the best line, high danger chances 10-2 in favor of Anaheim. So they just absolutely dominated the Predators, who had played the night before, but they took advantage of that. I mean, we can talk about built-in advantages all we want, but if you don't take advantage of them and really put the pedal down, then it doesn't really matter. And I thought that the Ducks did a good job of that. They were very aggressive, coming in on the forecheck. And we would see that on the first goal of the night for Anaheim. Adam Henrique getting a puck that squirted out by some good effort in the corner. Daniel Sprong jumps in on the forecheck, wins a battle. Getzlaf pops in as well, second man in, and then Sprong is able to get a touch on it. It gets out to the slot. Adam Henrique just kind of gets a backhand on it and then isn't able to convert on the first try. The puck pops out then to the slot, and he's able to just wire home a backhander. So kind of a crazy play.
Yeah.
But that was just kind of a hardworking play, sticking with it. Second, third opportunity, Sprong and Getzlaf working down low. I thought that this kind of encapsulated what was going well for that line specifically.
Yeah, and I mean, Henrique had a glorious chance right before he scored. I mean, UC Saros made an insane save with I think it was his head, to be able to stop the first chance from going in. And then Henrique is persistent, gets the puck, and just kind of fires a backhand that goes through three bodies and finds the back of the net. But that line as a whole was really, really good on the night, and it makes sense that they got rewarded. I mean, so not jumping too far ahead, but on the whole on the night, that line had a 65% Corsi for percentage and had a 72% expected goals for percentage. So they were generating chances and were constantly in the other team's zone. And Daniel Sprong provided a lot of energy for that line. I thought he got in on the forecheck, and that kind of happened there. And he was doing had some really good battles for some loose pucks in the corner, and really complimented, I think, Henrique and Getzlaf well for that line. And I mean, this is just a really good goal for that line, a good way to start the game. Up until that point, the Ducks were a bit snake bitten. They had a bunch of chances. If you were to look at the chart, which I'll throw up on the screen right now, you can see that it was consistently trending up, with the red dot being that my mouse is on is the first goal for the Ducks. It was constantly trending upward, and it was good to see them get rewarded with that goal. Yeah.
Now, two other things to note from that first period. Austin Watson would figure prominently in this first period. One of the first fights we've seen in years, just immediately off the opening faceoff. Nick Delorier and Austin Watson would go at it. Delorier would land two pretty hard rights, really caught him off guard there. But Austin Watson would maybe have the last laugh in that first period, scores a goal in the dying seconds, under 1 minute left, tips home a point shot, and that would tie it up. So maybe a disappointment for Anaheim in terms of, hey, with all that good play accounted for, the score was still tied. I still think that, I don't think that takes away from the period, but maybe from a team-wide perspective, it's a little frustrating just because, hey, we weren't able to totally capitalize.
Yeah, but I think it's frustrating because you feel like you played one of your best periods of the season, and I think undoubtedly it was. I mean, they had a 1.74 expected goals for and a 0.33 expected goals against, so they were dominant in that period as a whole, and that's in all situations. So 84% expected goals for percentage, constantly getting shots, constantly getting dangerous shots. And so, yes, it is frustrating that you end up that period that you just dominated and you end up at 1-1, but you got to be able to go into the locker room and be able to kind of put that behind you and understand the period that you played. And I think that you have to look at the positive from that period, that they consistently outplayed the other team. And that's something that kind of needs to be able, and this is just from on the player's perspective, instead of being deflated, understand that you outplayed them consistently, and you gotta, if you were to continue that, then you're gonna see the better of the result on the night.
Yeah, absolutely. But the frustration would only continue to mount, because then after that excellent first period, the Ducks would take a penalty, and Nashville goes on the power play, and they are able to convert. Craig Smith gets his 9th of the season, just kind of gets forgotten in the slot.
Yeah.
This is one of those high tip plays that you see teams look for nowadays. And it's a well executed play from Nashville, but this is a trend that we've seen now for the last couple games where the Ducks defenders just kind of leaving guys open in the slot on the penalty kill, and even at times on 5-on-5. You saw Josh Manson and Hampus Lindholm fall into that mistake again a bit tonight as well against Columbus. So frustrating, right? Because you had that excellent first period, and then you're down 2-1. But the Ducks would manage to climb back into it. Cam Fowler gets on the board, his 9th goal of the season. So, I mean, he is having just a fantastic season. Doesn't really have the point totals, though, to be in that Norris conversation, which is a bit unfortunate because I think I'm not saying he's been as good as some of those top guys, but I think he's I honestly think he's worthy of mention in that whole round. And I know that maybe that might be rich for some people's blood because he doesn't have the counting stats, but if you look at his on-ice impact, everyone who plays with Cam Fowler this season is better. Every defense partner he's had has been better with him than without him. And that's including guys like Jacob Larson. That's including guys like Michael Del Zotto. And I think it's time to give Michael Del Zotto a little credit. He's been pretty solid, but all this to say, Cam Fowler has just found ways to carry his partners this season. And that has been the knock against him throughout his career, is that he's not necessarily a guy who elevates his teammates when he's on the ice because of the way he plays. And that just hasn't been the case this season. It's been the opposite in a great way. He's managed to really make everyone around him better. So to me, that's one of the highest forms of praise you can give a defenseman, is when they're out there and they're improving their team's fortunes overall. And you saw it on this goal. I mean, he just kind of sneaks in from the blue line, is able to collect the puck and squares it up, just fires a wrist shot through a crowd, beats UC Saros far side, and that would tie it up 2-2 just over halfway through the game. So I don't know, what's kind of your estimation of Cam Fowler this season?
I think he's been insanely good for the Ducks team. I think he's had a really great year. I don't know if I'd go as far as you are, and I'm someone who's one of a huge Cam Fowler fan. I've always really liked his game.
You have a jersey.
I do. I think offensively, he's been given more freedom this year than I think he has in years past. I think Dallas Eakins has really kind of loosened up the reins to allow him to jump into the play more, to really kind of almost play more of a rover type spot. I think he's a very similar player, though, to what he's been in the past, and I think we're just seeing him kind of, and as much as I was one to not be a big fan of the Goodbranson trade, because of his contract, because of everything that we've gone over, that pairing has worked, and he's provided a bit of a stable option for Cam Fowler and allowed Fowler to kind of do what he does. And the other thing that I think Goodbranson does well is he understands that he needs to get Fowler the puck. Fowler's the guy that needs to be breaking it out of the zone, and I think when Goodbranson gets into trouble is when he doesn't do that. I think when this pairing's very successful, it's Goodbranson getting the puck to Fowler and allowing Fowler to kind of utilize what he's best at, which is getting the puck out of the zone. So I think Fowler's been really, really good this year. I think some of it is he's been put in a position to succeed, which, shocking, is beneficial for a player.
Yeah, like who would have thought that would be a good thing? Yeah, and it's interesting because I really do think that what you're saying is spot on, that Goodbranson, he's been, I think, better than expected in terms of when he's the one who has to break it out. But, and again, we don't really have the numbers for this, but just watching the games, it seems like anytime he has pressure on him, he just defers to Fowler. And I think that those two have an understanding that Fowler's the guy who's going to handle all that. And hey, that works. It doesn't have to be egalitarian. Obviously, that gives the forecheck a guy to hone in on. But I almost think that works to Cam Fowler's advantage because he can really beat guys when they overplay him with his skating. And so, anyway, it's just made for a really good combination.
Yeah,
and I think it's one of the better stories of the season. Spoiler: I may have written an article about it, so maybe that's why I'm just so flushed with all these ideas. Okay, let's move ahead in our recap here before we jump into our first break of the evening. Daniel Sprong, go-ahead power play goal. And we all read the feature on Daniel Sprong that Eric Stevens wrote, about his frustration going down to San Diego. And look, Daniel Sprong isn't some victim here. He didn't make the team. It happens. You could argue that was wrong, that he should have been on the team. But that's just nature. That's the nature of being an NHL player at his age. If you're not stout defensively, I suppose, or you don't hit guys, I don't know. But he would score a huge goal for his team, breaking that tie on the power play, collecting a rebound in front. And, I think scoring that goal in that way, more of a physical type goal, having to plant himself in front of the net, I think that will really work in his favor, because if you look at his game as a whole, you had two guys mention it in interviews over the last two games, Henrique and Getzlaf, talking about how Sprong has been getting in on the forecheck, has been playing a bit more physically. And so he's not, when Sprong first arrived to Anaheim last year, he blew everyone away with his skill, right? We all remember that crazy tight angle shot on Corey Crawford, right? And that's just a skill play. But to be a regular in the NHL, you got to be more than that, or at least that's the common refrain. And so I think he's definitely endearing himself to his team, playing in this just a bit more of a physical style. He's not out there trying to light guys up. He's not really stooping down to that level, but he's just playing a more involved game, and it's noticeable. And
go ahead. And I think the other thing is that his line mates are benefiting from it. They're getting rebounds. They're benefiting from that, from him getting in on the forecheck, from basically kind of this improved play from him. And one thing that, as you can see on the screen, that really jumps out to me when I'm looking at individual stats on the night, Adam Henrique had 9 individual shot attempts on the night.
Yeah, which is not really common for him.
No, and in all situations, he had 12 individual shot attempts, 9 shots on goal. It's a lot of shots on goal from a single player in all situations over the course of a game. That is significant. And obviously you need to build the sample size to make the judgment of whether or not this is repeatable, whether or not this is something that will continue. But it's very easy to draw the conclusion that Daniel Sprong is put on that line, and that line really prospered from it. And it's easy to make that connection there, that is a good thing moving forward.
Well, to help this show prosper, we're going to go into our first break, and then on the other side, we're going to wrap up this recap. So we'll be right back. Okay, back from the first break. So I guess we're on Sprong talk, and that's okay, because we didn't think we'd even see him in the lineup this season. Look, I think Daniel Sprong's an NHL player. I think he's not a perfect NHL player. I think that's fine. Very few are, but certain players, especially at his age, with his skill profile, are just held to a different standard. That's the reality. I'm not going to get into whether that's right or wrong right now, but I think that there's a pretty clear uptick when he's out there, as opposed to even like a Troy Terry, who maybe isn't quite as mature physically. I mean, you can just tell looking at them play that Daniel Sprong is a much bigger, kind of stronger player, and he's got a heavier stride. He's just got more power to his game. And so that's fine. It's not a knock against Troy Terry, but I think Daniel Sprong is an NHL player with skill, and look at that. You put him in the lineup and good things will happen. And so the question for him now is whether or not he can continue it. But I think as long as he brings this level of play in all 3 zones, I don't know what it'll take to really send him back down. We'll get into why that may happen sooner rather than later. But let's finish up the recap here first. So Adam Henrique, who you were talking about, putting up all those shot totals on the night, he would get his second goal of the game, padding the lead on the power play. Just a kind of weird play in that it was a nice setup by Getzlaf to go cross ice over to Sam Steele. But then Sam Steele tries to center it in kind of a shot pass style to Adam Henrique, and it just kind of goes in off of his skate, I believe, or off his leg and into the net. And hey, they don't ask how.
Yep.
They ask how many. That would make it 4-2.
Well, and those are the types of bounces that you get when you outshoot a team. If you are constantly outshooting a team, and that's why there's the old saying of you put pucks on net and good things happen, and that's kind of the same mentality that's taken with where kind of the thought process behind more advanced analytics has come from, is that essentially you shoot the puck more, you give yourself more opportunities to score. Hockey's a game that has bounces, has some situations that are kind of lucky. And if you put the puck on net more, you're giving yourselves opportunity to take advantage of that. And that's what happened here.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, getting a little bit ahead here to the third period. So Craig Smith, second goal of the game, would bring the Predators within one. He just kind of collects a rebound off a Nick Bonino attempt. And so that would make it 4-3. And then with just under 14 minutes left in the game, Rocco Grimaldi would tie it for Nashville. And then the game would go to overtime. John Gibson would make a really stellar save in overtime to keep the game going, to even keep it to keep Anaheim's hopes alive. And then the Ducks would end up winning in overtime, in the shootout. Ryan Getzlaf with a nice goal to bring it home for the Ducks. So I wouldn't call this one a perfect game by any means. But I think the Predators, you had to expect some pushback. You had to expect them to kind of bring it at some point. But the Ducks, I think, just got out so far ahead in that first period, even if they weren't leading per se, but just in their overall play, they set a tone. And I do think that ended up paying dividends for them in the long run.
Yeah, I think the issue that you have in this game, and you can kind of see it and you see on the screen with Natural Stat Trick up, is that in the third period, the Ducks really kind of sat back. And so when you when you score and venue adjust it at 5-on-5, they were at 38% Corsi for percentage, expected goals for percentage at 26.33. They allowed 1.15 expected goals against from when you score and venue adjust it. So they really sat back, and that's kind of my biggest issue with this game is they came out, they played a really good first period. The second period was solid. They had a lot of power play time, which is why if you're looking at the screen and looking at the game flow, that's why it's pretty flat, is a lot of the power play time there. But they were able to capitalize on their chances in that second period and take a pretty significant lead in a 4-2 lead. And instead of really kind of coming out and pushing the pace and staying on top of it and continuing, and here's the biggest issue is continue to play the way that they were playing all game. They adjusted the way they were playing to protect the lead. And that's kind of my biggest issue here is that they didn't continue to play that way. You got to kind of figure out that that's how you got to this point. So you got to continue doing that. Yes, it does leave you open, but if you're continually defending, continually sitting back, you're also leaving yourself open to chances against, shots against, everything coming against, and eventually goals. And a bend but not break attitude doesn't always work. And certainly against some of the better teams in the league, which I think it's arguable how Nashville is playing, but they have some really elite talent on their team. And you give them chances to score, they may put it away. Now, granted, the people that scored weren't those, but still, you can't do that against teams that are constantly going to come at you.
Yeah, and I mean, that just kind of goes without saying, but the Ducks did get bitten by it, ended up pulling the win out, though.
True.
Going into tonight's game, Tuesday night against Columbus, pretty positive injury report. Maybe the first time in years that we've seen an injury report for the Ducks that's just thoroughly positive. So Troy Terry cleared to play and day-to-day based on his conditioning. Derek Grant and Nick Ritchie cleared to skate with the team and may return after the All-Star break. Rickard Rakell just back in the lineup out of nowhere.
Right back.
And then Korbinian and Holzer cleared, but not in the lineup. So you've got three regulars that are back, essentially. Korbinian and Holzer is obviously not in the lineup every night, but he's now just an available body. You have Troy Terry, who's on the verge of being back, and Rickard Rakell, obviously the biggest addition out of those names. I'm sorry, Jake, it's not Troy Terry. Definitely it's Rickard Rakell in there. And so that gives Dallas Eakins a lot more flexibility. And you look at the lines going into tonight's game, and they're just so much more solid, with Rickard Rakell in there, because you have a first line of Henrik Getzlaf Sprong, and then your second line, Rakell, Lundestrom, Silfverberg, and then Jones, Steele, Kasha as that third line. And then you've got the usual suspects on the fourth line. So going into this game, I mean, first off, what do you make of that injury report? Any thoughts on, because initially Troy Terry's injury seemed to be keeping him out for quite some time.
It seemed serious.
Well, I guess it was a fracture in his leg as opposed to a break.
Yeah.
So that I guess shortens up the timeline. I'm not super savvy with this kind of stuff, so I don't want to delve too deep into it, but it's good news. I think you can't look at it any other way.
Yeah.
Now, in the first period of this game, though, the Ducks didn't have quite the performance that they did against Nashville, where they just so thoroughly dominated. But I still thought that it was a good first period from the Ducks. I mean, they largely controlled the pace of play. You look at the high danger attempts, from that inner slot area, they controlled that 5-2. Overall scoring chances were 12-5. This was just a good, solid period from the Ducks. Now, they would score the first goal of the night. Ryan Getzlaf would open the scoring. And this was just kind of a goal that happened in the blink of an eye. I mean, the Ducks win a faceoff. The puck goes back to Michael Del Zotto, and Ryan Getzlaf tips it home as he's screening Elvis Merzlikins. And so what was interesting about that is that the play before, the Ducks almost scored. They got a really good chance there. A nice exchange between Henrique, Sprong, and Getzlaf. And so, again, that line, maybe not quite as dominant tonight, but I still thought that they were clicking at a good rate.
Yeah, they were definitely clicking at a good rate. That goal just kind of comes from Getzlaf getting good tip, like you said. It kind of comes on a very bang-bang type play. And I think that line was also really good, like you said. So now that we've got, while we're on it, might as well bring it up. Here's natural stat trick. On the whole tonight, they were at 56% Corsi for percentage, and they were at 69.25% expected goals for percentage. So not as dominant as they were the other night, but they were still really good on the whole for the night. Adam Henrique only had 5 shot attempts as compared to the 9 that he had in all or at 5-on-5.
Slumping.
A little bit of a slump. Andre Kasha, though, had 5. Here's the thing. That line as a whole, Adam Henrique and Ryan Getzlaf both had 5 shot attempts for that line. And so Daniel Sprong wasn't even leading that line in shot attempts, but they were just shooting a lot, which is good.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing that's interesting about all of this is that, so moving away from that line a little bit, we've been talking a little bit on the pod lately and just watching these games how Isaac Lindstrom, I think he has moments where he looks really good. He's making nice plays, but the numbers just haven't backed it up. And tonight, you see Max Comtois get scratched in light of Rickard Rakell returning, and that line's numbers jump way up, right? So you see Rakell and Silfverberg united with Lindstrom between them, and all of a sudden, their expected goals percentage goes up to 63%. So really, who's driving the bus on that line. It's pretty clear between those two. But yeah, moving along here as we deal with the recap, the Columbus Blue Jackets would manage to tie it up with, I will be honest here, I think I watch a decent amount of hockey, pay attention to a decent amount of hockey. Had not heard of Eric Robinson before tonight's game. I'm gonna plead a little ignorance here. I'm sorry to the Cleveland Monsters.
Yeah.
The Cleveland Monsters fans
used to
of
be
the
Lake
world.
Erie Monsters.
Lake Erie Monsters,
Used to be.
And so on this play, speaking of Isaac Lindstrom, he's caught a little deep in the offensive zone, has to get back. Maybe he's a little gassed, and that frees up Robinson to sneak in on the side of Anaheim's defense. He gets a nice little pass and then just steps into a shot that beats Ryan Miller far side. It's not a shot that you can blame Ryan Miller on, but it didn't look great. It didn't look great. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
Again, it's a shot from in tight, but the way it was released, the way there was so much room on the blocker side, maybe Ryan Miller want that one back. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it's a sign of the time with him, kind of father time coming for him.
It's just not a shot maybe you expect him to stop anymore, because usually you expect the goalie to come out just a little further there and just totally block off that angle, because you got to think about it. Both, I believe, Fowler and Goodbranson are back there, or whoever the defenders are, and they have the middle lane completely blocked off. So just kind of odd to me. It is what it is. Going into the second period, though, Andre Kasha, who has been absent from the score sheet, had not scored a goal since November 25th against the New York Islanders. So he went 18 games without scoring a goal and makes it look rather easy on this one. Just comes in on the forecheck in the first 15 seconds of the game, lifts the stick, wins a battle, then just curls back around, goes forehand to backhand, brings it back into a shooting position, and then just roofs it short side on Merzlikins, and that would give the Ducks a 2-1 lead. So Andre Kasha kind of getting off the schneid there a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you could even say that Elvis was enjoying his Beats by Dre tonight. There you go. That was for you, Zenas. Zenas really wanted me to bring that bit back, and I'm happy I brought it back. But you expected him to eventually start scoring. He
just shoots so much.
He shoots so much, and on the whole, he's been snake bitten. He was, I believe this is before tonight's game, so per Hockey Reference, he was shooting 3.2% on the whole tonight or this season, and his shooting percentage last year and the year before, or last year was 11.7, year before 13.7. So a 3.2% shooting percentage really just isn't sustainable. There's no way that's going to happen. It's going to regress to the mean in the positive direction.
Especially when you're shooting as much as he does.
Yeah, and so this is the type of goal that you expected to see from him, and good to see him get off the schneid, and hopefully more come. And it's a little bit of a foreshadow right there.
Yeah, exactly. So after that, the Blue Jackets, this would be, to me, where the game was decided for Anaheim, I think, if we're being honest. So this was a controversial play, to say the least. Jake pulled up the rule book for us.
I did.
So we're going to be able to dabble into that. The Blue Jackets gained the zone. It looked like it was completely offside, and the Ducks just kind of stopped playing. Josh Manson collects the puck and just kind of throws it up the gut to no one. The Blue Jackets are able to intercept that. Pierre-Luc Dubois skates it in, just bursts down the wing, cuts to the net, just beats Manson to that net front, and then he gets it over to Nathan Gerbe, who also beats Hampus Lindholm to the net. Nathan Gerbe, by the way, you want to know how tall Nathan Gerbe is? First off, he's the shortest NHL player ever. He stands at 5'5".
Hey, he's shorter than me.
Yeah, he's a short guy.
It's very rare for me to say I'm taller than an NHLer.
Yeah, exactly. And so he's just a very short guy. And, I mean, credit to him for making it as far as he has. That is just downright impressive. Anyway, all of this to say, the play would be reviewed for offside. The Ducks would challenge, and I think rightfully so. I think it's a good challenge, just because it was so scrambly. Well, but explain to us why this was still ruled a goal,
so
that it was not offside.
I have up on the screen right now NHL.com with their actual kind of explanation of the challenge. First off, I think it's a good challenge for the Ducks to do, because I think on the surface, you take a quick look. He obviously looks offside, and it's one of those where it's really kind of once you take a deeper look at the play that you start to see it. So the explanation that the NHL gave was it was determined that Anaheim's Hampus Lindholm played the puck back into his own defending zone prior to Columbus's goal. The decision was made in accordance with Rule 83.1, which states, in part, if a player legally carries, passes, or plays the puck back into his own defending zone, while a player of the opposing team is in such defending zone, the offside shall be ignored and play permitted to continue. The spot of the rulebook, which isn't referenced, though, that kind of adds a little bit of gray area, in my opinion, to this, is there's a spot that's deflections and rebounds, and there's a part of it that says, however, any action by an attacking player that causes a deflection/rebound off a defending player in the neutral zone back in the defending zone, i.e. stick check, body check, physical contact, a delayed offside shall be signaled by the linesman. It's a little bit weird how that's written. It's a little bit weird to interpret, and it's also it's hard to tell when you watch the play if Gerbe actually gets a piece of the puck or if it's just Lindholm.
Well, they're also, and this is where you get into the territory of, do you have enough evidence to overturn the call on the ice?
And I think that is the key here, because essentially you have to know for a fact that Gerbe touches the puck, that he deflects it, that it wasn't only Lindholm that deflected it back into his own zone. So I think based upon the information given to them, the refs probably made the right call on this play. It's just a very tight call, and
it's a very niche call. You don't see this happen.
No, and so at that point you have to let it stand. And I think it's one of those where maybe if the Ducks had another minute maybe to take a look, if there was commercial, which there wouldn't exactly be after a goal, maybe they kind of see that and be like, all right, not worth it.
I think they would have challenged anyway.
You think?
Because, well, I think it's worth a challenge because it's so, you watch, right? Just throw a dart. Like if you're, I mean, you have the challenge for a reason, and I understand that, and we'll find out why it was kind of costly, but I think it's a good bet. I think it's not
Fair.
a bad bet, I should say.
Fair.
Like,
It's a risk.
It is a risk, and I think it was a fair risk because just the way that play shook out, you don't see this play very often. There's just a chance that the refs will say it's offside. I don't know. I mean, I think there's an argument to be made either way, and that's fine.
I think regardless, with the information given to them, it's a tight play, and when that is the case, I think that it just ended up being a spot where I'm not sure if it was, they said confirmed or stands, but to me, it's a situation where it was a tight play and they probably didn't have enough conclusive evidence to turn it over.
Well, I think that if you watch the play again though, and you kind of read the rule, I think the right call was made.
Yeah, fair.
So,
but disagreement for me.
Speaking of the risk of the coach's challenge, unsuccessful, Anaheim is assessed a delay of game penalty. The Ducks go shorthanded, and with 15 seconds left in the period, the Blue Jackets managed to tie it up. And, I mean, this is just a total nightmare scenario. But basically, the Ducks just utterly collapse in front of their own net. They're not able to clear the crease out. The puck then comes back out to Zach Werenski, who's able to bury home the one-timer into a net where Ryan Miller's just kind of panicking.
Yeah.
The Ducks have no idea what's going on. This was just a very poor-looking penalty kill.
Yep, scrambly.
Just extremely scrambly. Josh Manson losing his stick. Yeah, not good. And so the Blue Jackets would then take the lead. The Ducks would really not. This is maybe if you have some type of concern in this game, the Ducks didn't really show a whole lot of fight in that third period until the very, very end of the third period.
I mean, so
the numbers end up looking very good, and that is something to be commended. The high danger chances at 5-on-5 were 3-0. The shot attempts were 18-4. But again, a lot of that came late.
Yeah,
you didn't see enough, and it's not like they were getting clubbed. They were only down 1, and
so
just didn't see enough in that period.
So if you look at the screen right now, I've been switching between Money Puck and Natural Stat Trick. I think both are very good websites to be able to utilize and take a look at. But you can see that the beginning of this period, basically the first 10 to 12 minutes of the period, for expected goals in all situations, is pretty flat. And the downside to that is, I believe at the 12-minute mark, or the 8-minute mark, so 12 minutes left in the period, the Ducks had a power play. And now, granted, it ended up being negated and going to a 4-on-4, but they weren't really able to generate anything. And so, as you can see, it really took until late in the period when the pressure was on to start generating chances. One thing I do want to mention that we haven't talked about yet is Jakob Silfverberg going out with injury in this game, getting caught, I believe it was in the head with an elbow.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that. So we're going to go into our second break here, and then we'll be right back. Okay, so back from our final timeout. Like you were just saying, maybe the biggest story of the game is Jakob Silfverberg not coming back.
Yes, and I think maybe that contributed to the fact of the third period not being where you want it to be. The fact that there were guys getting double shifted all over the place. The fact that Daniel Sprong and Ondrej Kase really had to fill in that role and really kind of be double shifted. I'm going to take a look real quick. I'm shifting to sort by minutes in all situations on the night, but Ondrej Kase led all forwards in ice time at 20 minutes. And I don't know if I've ever seen Ondrej Kase over 20 minutes on the night. You also have Daniel Sprong. I mean, he only played 13 minutes. Rickard Rakell played 17 minutes. Max Jones played 19 minutes. So there were a lot of guys that were playing more minutes than they were used to. And I think that may have factored into it, a little bit of wear and tear at the end of the game from that situation, from missing Jakob Silfverberg, because he plays so many minutes in all situations that really comes into effect. And not saying that they should be playing like that they should have that big of a flat line in the third period. You'd like to see them really generate chances, but I think that if you're looking for a reason, that might be why.
Well, also Columbus is a very stingy team defensively.
True, that is true. Seth Jones and Zach Werenski are great defensemen.
That's the thing that we're kind of missing here is that this is a team that's built to defend leads.
True.
And so,
well,
and the Ducks, to be charitable, are not built to overcome leads.
Well, and that's a
hallmark, or overcome deficits.
That's a hallmark of this Columbus team because they don't really have offensive skill. Basically, if they're gonna win games, it's because of a team effort. Kind of having all 5 guys working together. So that's a fair point. I think a lot of our focus throughout the podcast typically is on the Ducks, but I think that's a fair point that there are 2 teams in this equation, and I think Columbus really did a good job in that third period.
But after the Blue Jackets empty net, the Ducks would manage to at least make it somewhat interesting, trying to replicate the Washington Capitals comeback against the Sharks last week, for those who missed that. Pretty incredible. But yes, so a point shot comes in from Cam Fowler, or more of a shot pass, I guess you could call it. Goes in off of Kasha's blade, and that would be his second of the night, 4-3. But at that point, there's 40 seconds left, and it's just enough time to maybe mount a comeback, but they just weren't able to do that. Final score 4-3. So, just some thoughts here from these 2 games. It's a lot. Definitely, but I think there's a lot to take away from it as well.
I think if we're going to start doing this pod in 2-game samples, I think this 2-game sample was a whole lot better than the last 2 games. The 2 games prior to this were the Arizona Vegas.
There's definitely an air of respectability in both of these games. Now, I think, like you mentioned, context is important in terms of who they were playing. Your adversary is really important. Tonight was probably one of the healthier Ducks teams that we've seen in a while, and I think that that's important. But also, you look at their opponent, and they were playing a really strong 5-on-5 team in the Columbus Blue Jackets, and they held their own. I mean, they didn't get ransacked in terms of the shot attempt totals or any of those 5-on-5 numbers. And just watching the game, you could see that they were playing a sound structural game. Against Nashville, Nashville is such a weird team to me because they were on the tail end of a back-to-back. They're in a season from hell where I think they had really high expectations bringing in Matt Duchene, and they're kind of just like a fringe bubble playoff team. And after that game, they fired their coach. So that probably says a lot about where the team was mentally overall. That being said, those are sometimes the teams that you have to find ways to beat, and the Ducks did that. So I think in both of these games, if you're looking for signs of improvement from the Ducks, it's that I think they came in and did mostly what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
In both of these scenarios.
Yep.
And for a team that, like you mentioned, for example, in the last podcast that we did, how so often that seems like that's not what they're able to do. Well, you could see that as a step forward.
It's definitely a step forward. And I think I know
health is a big part of this as well.
Yes.
And also Sam Carrick. I mean, don't want to keep throwing the guy under the bus, but I would say Daniel Sprong over Sam Carrick on the first line is an upgrade. And by the way, it's an upgrade that could have happened at any time.
And it is an upgrade that you and I both had talked about at length at multiple different times. But one thing that I did want to say on this, though, is that a lot of people out there are going to be frustrated with the fact that they lost to the Blue Jackets tonight. The fact that, as I was talking about, they kind of blew the lead against Nashville, and you want to see them defend that better. But, I mean, we've talked about it a fair amount this season. This season's a process. At this point in time, the probability of them making the playoffs is, 5% is where it's at on Money Puck? Something like that?
They're probably not making the playoffs.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fair to say that at this point.
Yeah, that ship is sailing.
The play has fallen off a bit as expected. Injuries have taken a hold also. Basically, kind of a lot of things have gone wrong as compared
Money
to
Puck has them at 6.8%.
Yeah, in order to make the playoffs, the Ducks needed absolutely everything to go
And by the way,
year.
They are only ahead of 3 teams. The Red Wings, the Devils, and the Senators in terms of playoffs.
And so that's the thing. Everything had to go right for them to make the playoffs or be in that race this year. And so that's just not the case. And so I think you need to kind of get out of your head that it's all about wins and losses at this point. And I think it's about the play and about seeing progress, seeing everything kind of go. And I think that's the most important part. And I think over the difference between the 2-game sample between these 2 games and the previous 2 games, you see improvement, you see change, you see things going in the right direction. And I think that's important. Yeah,
no, I agree. All right, folks, get your drink ready. But I'm going to be joining you soon, Jake, because the Canadians are now down to 30% playoff probability.
Damn. Although the Canadians' underlying
The
numbers
Canadians
are really
have
good.
been beaten by the Red Wings 3 times this season.
Yeah, that's not good.
They account for a significant percentage of the Red Wings win total this season. It's not what you want. It's quite the opposite. So, but hey, we have Ilya Kovalchuk to cheer on. So
yeah,
that makes everything better. No, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of where the Ducks are at. I think that now there's really no question about it. Whereas in the beginning of the season, it's a fresh slate. Everyone's all excited and giddy. One thing that I will say, though, although there were some notable gaffes in this game, 57% expected goals for Lindholm Manson tonight.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yep.
Because that pairing has just not been up to par lately, at least not to the par that we've expected of them in recent years, right? Where they're such a dominant pairing, whereas Fowler and Goodbranson have kind of all of a sudden taken that mantle. So that was tonight. And then if you look at the game against Nashville on Sunday, Lindholm Manson all the way up in the 90 percentiles or 90%. And so there's a bit of effects there on that game overall, but still, that's, I think, another positive to draw from is that Lindholm and Manson, although they are still prone to some mistakes, hey, they're largely, when they're on the ice, things are going the Ducks' direction.
Yeah. Question time?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, so let's jump into it. So, for those of you watching the show on YouTube, yes, we do the show on YouTube. You can find us there if you search for the AC Pod. And if you want to leave a comment, we will go ahead and take a look and answer any questions that you have on there. If you want to like and subscribe to the channel, that helps a lot. Or if you're listening to a recorded version of this, yes, we do post this on YouTube or on Spotify and all the podcast services. But the real fun thing that we have for this show is the Twitch stream. You can find us at twitch.tv/acpod, which is where we live stream the show each and every time. You can see both Felix and I as we're going. You can see all the different stuff that we throw on the screen. And if you want to help support the show, you can in a way that's completely free to you. If you have Amazon Prime, you get Twitch Prime, and you get one free Twitch Prime sub each and every month. And it does help the show in more ways than you can imagine. And with that Twitch Prime sub, you get special emotes in the chat, special badge next to your name. And on busier nights, we will prioritize your questions. So let's get into some questions. Ken Pafu starts, does anyone have 2 Connor McDavids? Because that's the only deal that the Ducks should take.
Wait, what was that?
It was more a joke about Connor McDavid. But did you see the McDavid goal last night? Speaking of that?
Yeah, he ended Morgan Riley's career there with that move. Yeah, that was insane.
It was absolutely stupid it's stupid how good he is.
He's the best player in the league. He's the best player in the world. I mean, it's been true for a couple of years, but
let me ask you this. Is he the best player in the history of the game? Is he the most skilled player in the history of the NHL?
I think he's definitely the fastest or the best skater. The most dominant skater in the history of the NHL.
Yeah.
I think I'm skill-wise, it's tough to say because when you can skate like that, right? Your hands are not quite as vital, but he's got elite hands, elite shot as well, but
and
to
elite
me,
speed.
But that's what I'm saying is to me it's really his feet where he makes his money. I mean, his skating, the way he uses his edges, his power. I mean, Connor McDavid is just an elite athlete. The things he does, just because you have very good skating technique, doesn't mean you can do that. He's just got elite athleticism, and it's amazing to watch.
Yeah. So I
actually turned into a Connor McDavid podcast.
I do want to mention this real quick. We got a comment on our last pod from Mark Bertrand on YouTube, so I did want to read through it real quick. Basically, let me kind of get to the gist of it. I think you guys are right that Manson and Silfverberg will be big trade chips for the Ducks. Also, Ryan Miller, a lot of teams will be looking for a reliable backup heading into the playoffs. He'd be a rental and wouldn't fetch the Ducks much, but I could see him being moved for a pick or prospect. And I'd say that's probably correct. It just depends on whether or not he wants to go, because that was the big thing last year with him. But he said, at what point does Bob Murray get put on the hot seat? He's not exactly doing a bang-up job with the retool. Can't fire the coach. In regards to the expansion draft to the Ducks leave, Ryan Getzlaf exposed. His contract is almost up. He's got a few more years left of hockey and doesn't factor into their long-term rebuild. I don't see them trading him, but what's the point of protecting him? I'll get the expansion draft point, but do you think Bob Murray gets put on the hot seat? Or what point do you think he gets put on the hot seat?
I think this season is kind of going as expected. right? I mean, what's the alternative expectation that the Ducks are fighting for a playoff spot?
Yeah,
maybe there was some optimism for that.
I think the Samuelis might have had that optimism.
Well, I got some bad news for you.
I mean,
I just don't. I think that what happened, and we may have talked about this on the last podcast, is that there was just a severe overestimation of the talent on this roster.
Yeah,
it happens.
Yeah,
like it just happens. You see the names on the jerseys on the roster sheet, and you have this idea in your head of what they were, but players get worse over time. There's a certain point where players don't get any better, and the Ducks' young players have not. I mean, I also think that there was a big optimism about how good the kids would be.
Yeah.
Even though, I mean, the evidence suggesting that would happen was limited. Let's just put it that way. So, like Troy Terry had a really good season, but outside of that, there was no way of really knowing.
Yeah.
And so I just think that whatever expectations they have, I think those are now properly aligned.
Yeah.
And we will just have to see. I don't think he's in the hot seat right now, though, despite maybe that optimism. I think it will take one more year of this for him to truly be on the hot seat. I again, unless there's this dramatic turnaround, I have a hard time seeing him back beyond his current contract.
Yeah, we'll see. As for his contract,
he might also retire. I mean,
I do want to.
Bob Murray is not young.
I do want to make note of it that his contract extends past the expansion draft into the season after. So that is key there. And then on the point of the expansion draft, Ryan Getzlaf, his contract, I believe, expires at the end of next year. And so he actually they could expose him in the expansion draft even though he has a no movement clause because his contract will be up. And this is similar to what the Sharks did with Joe Thornton, that they left him exposed and then just signed him on July 1 because even if Vegas took him, he's a free agent. So it's not as if he has to sign there. So I could see the Ducks probably doing that, doing a wink, wink, nudge, nudge with Ryan Getzlaf saying, hey, here's a contract. We can't give it to you right now. Either we give it to you right after the expansion draft is over and you're not taken, or we give it to you on July 1 if for whatever reason Seattle takes you because they don't want anyone else.
Yeah, and I understand that GMs, do work into their later years. I mean, Jim Rutherford is 70, for crying out loud. Yeah. But Bob Murray's going to be 66 this year, and by the time his contract is up, I mean, he'll be, 67, 68, somewhere around there. So, I mean, how long does he want to keep doing this?
Yeah.
I mean, he's been doing this forever. Maybe he really wants to lead this team to another Stanley Cup. Maybe he believes that there is that possibility on the other side of all of this, but I don't know. I just think there's a lot up in the air once that contract runs out.
Yeah. And so let's get into some more questions. So we've got this question from Zenas8. Says, when Terry is healthy, does he go down, or does Sprong, Rowney, or Kasha lose a spot? I actually think the answer is if Silfverberg's out, then he just comes into that spot.
Yeah. Well,
I think it's a simple answer at this point.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that now with this Silfverberg injury, we'll just have to see. There's kind of no way to really know.
Yeah. I think that if Silfverberg's healthy, it's a much more interesting situation that you have. Maybe Adam Henrique gets moved back to center and either Terry or Sprong is thrown on the left wing and Lundestrom is sent down. I think that if I were to pick, that would be the route I would take.
I don't know how much longer Lundestrom has. I mean, it's kind of startling that he's made it this far.
Yeah.
But the coaching staff must like what they're seeing. I don't know.
You put out a tweet today that was basically like because I think last podcast you and I got into it slightly on the fact that you thought he had looked good and his numbers.
I mean, I still stand by that. But
his numbers are not good though since he's come back up.
My theory on that though is that he's been playing next to Max Comtois, and Max Comtois isn't a guy who seems to be driving 5-on-5 play in his career so far. And you have two rookies on the same line and then Jakob Silfverberg. Like, that's just not a recipe for success. And then you see tonight between Rakell and Silfverberg how his numbers changed dramatically. And we've seen him do that between Rakell and Silfverberg before. So it's tough to say, right? Chicken or the egg. I mean, I, again, don't think he's driving that bus at all. But if he's out there and the team isn't getting scorched, then maybe he stays around longer. I don't know.
Yeah. Let's see. Time Twitch asks, since the process isn't working right now, Who gets traded for picks at the deadline?
The eternal question. We did a whole hour. Not a whole hour.
Did we?
We did a lot of time.
Oh, that's
on
right.
the last
We did.
podcast.
I forgot.
Yes.
It's been a while, So
Has it,
fair.
though?
Go on the last podcast. We talked about it a little bit more. This is a question that's just for me. NJ Devils fan 68 said Wrestle Kingdom happened over the weekend. What was your favorite part and least favorite part? So Felix, I'll give you a little description right here. Wrestle Kingdom is New Japan's WrestleMania, and it's a 2-day event that happens at the Tokyo Dome in Japan, where they got 45,000 people. Felix is definitely tuned out at this point in time. Favorite part, I liked night 1 the most. Honestly, I thought the Okada Ibushi match was absolutely insane. That was one of the best matches I think I've ever seen. In terms of least favorite parts, I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of the way that New Japan does tag team wrestling necessarily, especially the 3-person tag team, and it's super formulaic. So let's just go with that. Especially with, I don't really know the old guys in New Japan, so watching those, there wasn't this nostalgia for me or anything like that. But the top matches were great.
Scripted.
Oh, sorry. Actually, no. Favorite part was the Will Ospreay match. That match was just stupid.
Scripted.
So good. So good. So there you go. There's my thoughts on Wrestle Kingdom. Night 1 was better than night 2. Still really great. If you're a wrestling fan, do yourself a favor. Go subscribe to New Japan World for 999 yen and watch the event.
Real.
Yes. NJ Devils fan also says thank you, Jushin Thunder Liger, who had his retirement match. So
I don't know what you just said. That was 5 minutes of nothingness to me.
There you go. Japanese wrestling.
Okay, moving on.
Hockey Boys asks, question, do we see Trevor Zegras signing after this season? Do we see him sign? I'm trying to think, is there a benefit to him signing during the season? Because he would,
no.
The benefit to signing at the end of the year is if you play in an NHL game, it burns a year, but that only happens if you're over 20. If not, then it just counts as slide rule. So I guess the only benefit is he would get paid actual money and get the experience from it.
Yeah. The experience of being paid money. Yeah. I mean, yeah. No, I don't know what to make of that, really. We'll just have to see. Because the Ducks have his rights for any drafted player they have for a while. But I would suspect that he'll get signed this summer.
Maybe
and then next year he makes the jump.
Maybe the only way that I could see it happening is if the Gulls are in a playoff race or in the hunt for the Calder Cup, and that really just adds another high-skilled player to the Gulls to give them a chance.
Yeah, that doesn't seem likely, though. But here's what I would say. So I think that with him, he gets signed this summer, and then I think he plays in the AHL next year. Or maybe goes straight to the NHL. We'll see.
I could see him straight to the NHL. I don't think maybe this is my opinion. I don't think they sign him if he's going to be in the AHL. I think they let him have another year in college if that's the case. But I believe
he actually signs.
Sorry, lost you for a quick second.
Yeah, well, we'll just have to see.
Yep. So I think that is going to do it for the night for questions. One thing that I did want to mention, because I got a text from my wife asking me to mention this, but please go donate and support Australia. That entire country is on fire. We honeymooned there. There's a former writer for our site in Benny who lives there. There are tons of animals that have been killed, and there are lots of firefighters working to save it. So if you want to go donate to help, she asked me to please plug that. So
yeah, that's, well, now I feel guilty for what I'm about to plug. Thanks.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
No, but in all seriousness, definitely. Yeah, so on that note, that's going to do it for our show tonight, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Couple different ways that you can support the show. One that's totally free to you, takes about 2 minutes of your time. Leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps the show get noticed, helps us climb those rankings, and just lets us hear from you guys and kind of keeps us plugging along here. We also have a Patreon page that's at patreon.com/acpod. For $1 a month, you get access to our patrons only Discord chat. So during games, we banter back and forth. It's mainly just me chirping Jake. That's what it's come down to. And
it's become our text messages
and posting Pierre Maguire memes.
It's become our text messages. There's no difference between our text messages and Discord at this point.
They're fun. They're a lot of fun.
Sure,
I think the people I think that people enjoy them. It's $1 a month. Come on. $5 a month though. You get that, and then you get 2 bonus episodes. So, and those shows are a lot of fun. The most recent one that we did, we went all the way in depth on the past Ducks decade. We did an entire hour on the Ducks decade as a whole. We went season by season, and then we did another hour. If you enjoy kind of the banter, the tone of this show, I think you will enjoy those Patreon episodes quite a bit. So that's at patreon.com. We are on YouTube. We are giving you many different avenues to check out the show and enjoy it from. Now, make sure to check out AnaheimCalling.com. I don't know how much longer I will be saying that on this show, but for now, that's where we're located, AnaheimCalling.com. At Anaheim Calling is where you can find it on Twitter. Jake is on Twitter at ReindeerGames91. Wrestling tweets galore. I am on Twitter
do I tweet
at
that much
Felix.
about wrestling?
I don't think you do. I just like saying that. It's a
Occasionally.
narrative I like to push.
Occasionally.
It's a narrative I like to push.
Occasionally during pay-per-views.
I am on Twitter at Felix_Sicard. So that will do it for our show tonight, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you at the next episode.
Bye.